like to point to, oh, okay. So most like to refer to the 4Cs framework. And the 4Cs are content, communication, cognition, and culture, which I'll cover in more detail in just a moment. So CLIL means different things to different people. For some, it has a narrower definition as a single approach. To others, it's more of a methodology or a mindset. Perhaps in the broadest definition, some would say that it's just good education or education itself. Most CLIL theorists would agree that CLIL is an umbrella term that covers dozens or more educational approaches, which makes it quite difficult to define. And for me, CLIL has always been more of a verb than a noun. It's always, it's not always useful to try to pin it down to a specific approach, and it makes more sense in action. And that action involves, putting educational theory that you find useful into practice, but also letting that practice inform your own theory of CLIL. And in this way, it's a very pragmatic approach. You can take what works for you and discard what doesn't. And CLIL, which focuses more on language or is timetabled as a language class and taught by a language teacher, is usually referred to as soft CLIL. On the other hand, if CLIL focuses more, if the CLIL class focuses more on subject teaching or is taught by a subject teacher, then it's called hard CLIL. And in European countries like Spain or the Netherlands, hard CLIL is more common, while in Japan, soft CLIL is the norm. And looking at the history, some researchers point out how ELT or English language teaching has evolved over time. Originally, the focus was on text only. So with the grammar translation method, the idea is that language consists of rules, and the students must learn the rules of the language, which is taught most efficiently through the student's first language, right? And this focus eventually changed to producing the form perfectly. And this is with the audiolingual method. And the idea here is that students do a lot of pattern practice, repetition, memorization. And at this point, there's still a disconnect between form and meaning. But around the time of the 1970s, there was a shift to focus on communication, even if that communication isn't perfect. From a structural syllabus, focusing on form, to a communicative syllabus, focusing more on meaning. And here we have more emphasis on in-context language use. And this became known as CLT, or communicative language teaching. In the weak version of CLT, a typical pattern is PPP, or presentation, practice, and production. I'm sure you've all seen this many times, but there's still an emphasis on grammar and vocabulary, and it often only uses lower order thinking skills, meaning that students don't need to think, and nothing new is being learned in terms of content. But in more recent history, some researchers believe that we're experiencing a third revolution, which is based on competency. And this includes CLIL with its 4Cs and 4Ts framework, and also its aim to develop students' 21st century competences. All right, so let's look a little bit more in depth at the CLIL frameworks. So content refers to literacy with concepts about a specific subject. Communication refers to literacy with the target language. Cognition refers to lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. And culture is about global awareness, understanding your relation to the social other. And these are the 4 Cs. Some CLIL theorists also talk about the 4 Ts: text, content and language input. So not only print text, but any kind of input. For example, a YouTube video could be a kind of text. Talk puts emphasis on a two-way interactional method of teaching, so dialogue between teacher and students, and not just a monologue or a one-way lecture. Teamwork is about co-constructive learning, so pair work, group work, and also whole class activities. And this is based on social cultural theory. So namely that, learning is inherently a social process and let's see what, oh yeah, tasks. Task in CLIL, these are aimed at cognitive activity. So developing students' critical thinking skills or implementing the negotiation of meaning and so on. And when orchestrated well, all of these are interrelated and will promote the development of competences. And in the global era, the aim is to use language through different content to develop these competences, right? So if we are to have a sustainable global future, our students need to be able to discuss and debate about issues with one another. And the four C's and four T's frameworks are, I guess you would say, a tool or a guideline for CLIL teachers to sort of think about how we can best develop these competences in our students. So let's go through a few of the 4C's principles in a little bit more detail, starting with content. Content consists of two types of knowledge. We have declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. Declarative knowledge is textbook knowledge, so factual knowledge. And procedural knowledge is how knowledge is used in real world applications. So usually as a kind of springboard for something else, for something in context where, for example, opinion might be important. And both types of knowledge are important, but the emphasis in CLIL is more on the procedural knowledge. Cognition. In CLIL, there's a lot of emphasis put on cognition, and some CLIL practitioners call it the most important component of the 4Cs. And cognition is about deep learning. CLIL theorists often refer to Bloom's taxonomy. This pyramid is Bloom's taxonomy, which includes lots or the lower order thinking skills. And these are the type of skills that are fundamental, but not very cognitively demanding. With HOTS, or the higher order thinking skills, students must, for example, analyze data, evaluate differences, and create something such as a PowerPoint or maybe a presentation. These tasks are usually more open-ended, and there might not be one quote-unquote correct answer. And finally, culture, or also sometimes called community here in Japan especially. This refers to intercultural awareness, connecting the dots between the communities of the classroom, the local town, city, country, all the way through a global society. So looking beyond the immediate boundaries of the classroom and exploring the social significance of what's being learned. Also, as you can see, there's quite a few differences between what we would say traditional ELT or English language teaching and CLIL. And overall, CLIL places a lot of emphasis on integration, on interaction, and authenticity, right? Which is a topic we'll discuss more in depth later in the session. It's also worth noting that CLIL is very flexible in the way that it spreads across a learning continuum. So it can be, light or heavy in terms of frequency, partial or total in terms of weight. So in other words, CLIL does not need to take up the whole class, and it can also be done on an infrequent basis, right? Okay, so having covered some of the theory, let's talk about CLIL lesson development. And CLIL lesson development consists of 3 steps. So let's start with choosing content, subject, and integrating the 4 Cs. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the appealing points of CLIL for language teachers is that the content can be anything really. So I recommend choosing, something academic, for example, science, history, art, math. All of these subjects are easily recognizable, and you can draw from a wealth of resources, right? Including collaborating with actual subject teachers. But the content could also be something more focused topic, for example, on a particular social issue, or it could be about health and fitness, or computer programming, or cryptocurrency. Please don't think that you have to do something traditionally academic, because that's not the case with soft CLIL. We should keep in mind, though, that subjects are not simply categories of information. They're built around concepts, points of view, and skills. So when we think of our content subject, we should have in mind some idea of the concepts, points of view, and skills that we want students to learn. And it may be helpful to brainstorm by making a mind map. For example, a mind map about teaching students habitats might look something like this. It should take into consideration the 4Cs frameworks, as well as what competencies or what skills we want our students to learn. You may also find it helpful to use this CLIL lesson planning sheet. This is used by many CLIL practitioners in Japan and has been found to be very helpful for keeping lessons within the 4Cs framework. Okay, so let's get into our breakout rooms. And in the breakout room, please discuss or brainstorm a content subject or topic, or perhaps talk from your experience teaching CLIL, and think about and discuss what concepts, points of view, and skills you want your students to learn, and try to fit these into the 4Cs framework. And I made a Google Jamboard available for each breakout room. So if you've never used Google Jamboard before, I'll briefly show how that works. Let me share my screen here. And I'll send the link for this in just a moment. But this is what the Google Jamboard looks like. As you can see, you have some tools on the left-hand side here. I recommend using the sticky notes feature, this one, and you can type your ideas like this, using, again, the sticky note feature here, and go ahead and paste them to get some ideas up on the board. So again, talk about the concepts, points of view, and skills. And also, if you want to reference what I was just talking about, you can page to the right or go to the next frame at the top here. So just click to the right. And if it's helpful, please feel free to use this template I provided. You can put your own topic in there and start putting ideas up on the board. And if you are curious again about what sort of CLIL materials might look like, I've included some examples depending on the group that you're in. So for this one is for junior high school. But if you keep scrolling to the right, you can see those examples if you're curious about that. So I'll leave it to, I guess, John to go.
Yeah, that would be fine. If you can, just one more time, you're going to share that link with everybody once they join the breakout rooms. Is that what you're going to do? Okay.
That's right.
And, and for the task for everybody, again, a very in-depth background of CLIL. It's much simpler